organizers for having us. It's been a wonderful experience to have Márton Orosz on campus, and I just want to give a brief introduction. Márton is a curator and an art historian, a PhD. He's the curator of the collection of photography and media arts at the Museum of Fine Arts in Budapest. He has been a Terra Fellow at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, also the first György Kepes Fellow at the Advanced Studies and Transdisciplinary Research at MIT. And his research and publication have addressed light-based media, photography, avant-garde collecting, abstract, geometric, and kinetic art, computer art, motion picture, and animated film. But here we are sitting with a filmmaker. So, Márton, could you say a few words how you went from art history to producing this film?
Yes, I will try to. So thanks very much for inviting me over here. This is my first time here in Santa Barbara, and this screening was a first official screening in the West Coast area, because my film was first screened in the US in October at MIT in occasion of the 55th anniversary of Kepes' Center for Advanced Visual Studies. So I'm an art historian, I'm a curator, I'm working at the Museum of Fine Arts, actually at the Vasarely Museum. The Vasarely Museum is the smallest, the tiniest entity of the MFA, Museum of Fine Arts and Hungarian National Gallery in Budapest. And Viktor Vasarely was the founder of optical art. I don't know if you have ever heard his name. Basically what he did is concrete, abstract geometric art. He was also born in Hungary, and in the 1930s, the same year that Kepes, he emigrated from Budapest to Paris, and he became a French-Hungarian artist. And in the 80s, he donated a lot of his stuff to Budapest. So that's why my ancestors were able to open that museum in Budapest for his art.
So talk a little bit about how Kepes ended up at MIT, having come to the US in 1944, as we saw in the film, with being in Chicago, invited by Moholy Nagy to start the new Bauhaus.
Right.
And so we're looking at 1944, 45 to 1967, I guess, when he started.
Yes, 1945 was when he was invited over to MIT. But
already?
Yes,
already.
But actually he was invited to teach in Chicago at the newly founded New Bauhaus,
Right.
Which later became a School of Design and then Institute of Design in the mid of 40s. And he taught their photography, and he established the first light department. So I don't think of any other department, in the university level, in the academic world, that was solely concentrating and focusing on light as a creative medium. So that is what Kepes did, and that involved not just photography, but he experimented with every possible tools that would use light as a medium, and also he thought advertisement, graphic design. His first background, his first job was the graphic design. This is how he was able to make a living in Germany as well. So he was not associated with the Bauhaus per se, but he knew most of these Bauhaus artists and architects and designers, including Walter Gropius, the founder of the Bauhaus, Herbert Bayer, who later in Aspen, Colorado, established this design event every year. The most
Right.
the best designers recuperated, and there was like a conference on design. And he invited to MIT because of his first book, The Language of Vision, which he published in 1944 in Chicago.
So one of the things that may not be apparent, but it's very much present in the various conversations about Kepes' work, is that being at MIT seemed to be a very complex balancing act. And I'm looking at the time period. So basically, it's the 1960s. It's the Cold War. We have the Vietnam War. We have the post-Sputnik emphasis on scientific development in the West, and so MIT being one of the leading institutions in this country, advancing military technological research. There was also the pressures of the corporate industries. There was the counterculture movement, which was possibly half of it was anti-technology, the other half was embracing technology in certain ways. Meanwhile, he's trying to push and promote his own research and innovation in design and aesthetics. And I think he was the first at MIT to have this position. So what's your sense of how he managed to kind of navigate this very complex and multi-layered situation?
Yes, it was not an easy time, during the 1950s, when he first kind of established himself as a professor at MIT. That was the McCartney era. And he had this communist past, he was a teacher of the Abraham Lincoln School, for example, in Chicago. He had contact to the Mexican communists, including Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo,
Right.
and also in Europe, during the 1930s, he sensed, I don't know if we should mention this, but he had this Jewish origin, and he was a painter. His background was on visual arts, but at MIT he just met these wonderful scientists and engineers. So he tried to establish this center, like this place where artists and scientists could find a common denominator and work together, collaborate on certain projects already in the 50s. But the time was not propitious for this endeavor, and he was backed up by this president, James Killian, who was the scientific advisor of President Eisenhower, and he was the one who tried to find a way how the U.S. military could cope with the Russian, So he was the one who tried to find a solution for the Cold War problem, and the Vietnam War was there when Kepes started the center in 1967. So and we just seen in the film, that Kepes' center became like a shelter as well for the student demonstrator, for the student protesters. But this is a good question, whether Kepes wouldn't have that background at MIT, would have been able to accomplish his goals in another institution, and other universities, and another place, which was not MIT.
Yesterday you mentioned also the president Killian was a nuclear weapons scientist, or just a nuclear.
He was also involved in the Manhattan Project.
Yeah.
But he was also a Sunday painter.
Okay.
And
that's
like
an important
probably
connection.
that's why he had this understanding of what Kepes' idea was, and probably it was also because of the Vietnam War that the MIT administration allowed Kepes, so they gave him a green light to just embrace this idea of the center. They just wanted to leverage this. Also politically, that time during the Vietnam War, MIT had this accusation that being the epicenter of the military industrial complex. So probably that's why Kepes was able to just establish his center. And his center was opened on the same day when the Center of Theoretical Physics was opened.
Okay.
So it was also this kind of dual like event, one the science and one the art side had a presence, in 1967. But then later, in the early 70s, Kepes' Center really struggled to find the necessary funding to upkeep the center. So, and 1974 was the year when Kepes was forced to retire. At that time, in the 70s, it was probably MIT policy, or maybe the 70s was a different time that the professor had to go to retire. So Kepes was not able to continue to direct his own center. And then a German kinetic artist, Otto Pine, replaced him, and that was the end of it. So all the freedom gone, and the fellows had to teach in order to get the center running.
So there's a interesting photograph in the movie where Kepes is sitting next to Buckminster Fuller.
Yes.
And Buckminster Fuller also is a very, very interesting, enigmatic personality. He was funded by the U.S. Navy. A lot of the early kind of developments came through that. At the same time, he was embraced as a visionary by the counterculture movement. So I'm kind of curious if you have any anecdotes about if they interacted at all, or
they were very good friends, but they didn't really had anything
projects or any publications.
That was in the end of the 50s or beginning of the 60s when Bucky Fuller asked Kepes to design one of his exhibitions.
Oh, okay.
But unfortunately, it didn't succeed. So this exhibition was not realized. And there is, if I remember correctly, there was also an LP. I think Bucky Fuller Talks Aloud. I think that's the title. And Kepes wrote I think some notes on the cover, like a blurb or something like that. And he designed a cover of that LP too.
So I want to shift now a little bit towards the filmmaking process. So what were the challenges in creating a movie like this?
As I said in the beginning, I'm a filmmaker now, but I have a different background.
Right.
So when I started my PhD 15 years ago on Kepes in Hungary, the main university in Budapest, I just realized that it would be maybe a better medium to just get these interviews, to conduct interviews with Kepes' associates and students, rather than just putting a tape out on the table. So I started with a very obsolete technology. You know, these DSLR cameras just started to appear on the scene, and I recorded also the voice separately. So it was a big challenge for me just to sync the audio with the video. And also because I'm based in Budapest in Hungary, and all these precious archival materials are here in the States.
Right.
That's why I had to apply fellowships, to come here and to conduct research on Kepes, which was not that easy. So I managed to do, like you said in the introduction, that at the Smithsonian I had like a 3-month fellowship, and I was also a fellow at MIT for another semester, and these 2 terms allowed me or provided me the opportunity to conduct this research with my interviewees. And as you saw probably in the final credit, the end credit, I think more than 60% or 70% of my interviewees are unfortunately passed away in the meantime.
And what about going through the archives? What about, I'm very much interested in how you managed to find the things, and then once you had them at the beginning, did you have a kind of concept of how the narrative would go, or were you discovering things in the archives and then kind of assembling them in various ways and eventually coming up with a kind of way by which to connect them?
Yes, I think it happened very intuitively. I just opened a project file, and I tried to get a sense, which kind of hierarchy I would organize my material, so which kind of structure I would build out of these footage that I have. So the first edit, the first version of my film, that was I think more than 3 hours long. You have, I mean,
makes sense.
You have to consider that I had these, I think, more than 200 hours of interviews. So a lot of hard drives, where these interviews were sitting, and I just listened to and watched all the interviews. I tried to make transcripts as well, but then if you are editing a film, sooner or later everything will be in your head, and you just pull out materials, based on certain criteria. But it was a very long time to also record in these interviews, and also a very long time to edit the film. And also then, when I finished the editing, I contacted a musician, and also a typographer, because not just the music, but the type, the font, that I used for the film is very unique. Actually, it's an experimental font which was inspired by Kepes' works. So I just sent out a couple of images to the typographer, and he came up with a font design that I implemented in the film.
So you mentioned composer. Can you talk a little bit about the music? There's quite a range of musical styles, and can you talk about how that happened and how it came to be?
Yes, to find a musician was actually not that easy, and I'm more of a visual person. I don't know anything about music. So with the musician was the same, that I tried to assemble like a group of images, and I contacted an electroacoustic musician, but I was not very confident with the result. So my wife recommended me this guy who did who actually in the past only did films for nature, like for Discovery Channel, and mostly like these films that has has nothing to do with like art and science documentaries or feature films, and he was very much inspired by these images, and he said that he is very would be very keen to collaborate with me on this project. And I think what he did is really fascinating. I really like his music. Some people don't like the music, and some people very like the music. So I'm just having these reviews from both sides. But I think that in most cases the music is really matches very well with the images, with the pictures, and that gamelan music that you might experienced, which
During the Mohoy night,
which is the score, yes, the
animation of his light sculpture.
Yes, it's an experimental film, one of the first experimental film that have been ever done in 1930. This light play, that's the title, the English title of Moholy Nagy films, and Moholy. I mean, that time there were no electroacoustic music. There you had several experiments in that area, but Moholy actually suggested many type of musics that could accompany his film. So one was Hungarian folk music, or like dance music,
Right.
and the other one was this gamelan music. So that we know about this because in the archive at the IIT in Chicago, he put a note that if you are in that mood, then you can just put the LP,
Okay.
which is gamelan music. If you don't want to do that, then it's also okay to use this other music, which would give you maybe the same result.
I was also very fascinated by all of the public works. I didn't know he did all those public works, and as we heard, many are destroyed, and there's probably very little documentation. Is the Harvard subway station still in place?
The Harvard subway station were defunct for many decades, and a few years ago, the MBTA, I think this is the company,
Right.
In Boston, the public transportation company, they redid the mural. So they used different technology. I think there are now everything is digital, and they used LED lights that would lit from behind this stained glass mural. And the cybernetic so the programmation is also different. Actually, they also reached out to me. They contacted me how to do that, and I suggested them the original idea, but they just wanted to do something according to their tastes. So I'm not very happy actually what they did. but it's one of the only like cybernetic installation that Kepes did, and it's still on place, because his KLM, in New York, and the Dutch airline company's ticket office, unfortunately that's gone, and nobody knows where the original parts went to. Somebody mentioned to me that it is or was in a hangar somewhere in New Mexico, but I was not able to follow up. So no, actually, that would be something that we might
research,
consider to reconstruct.
Right.
So there's a light museum in Budapest now. They just have the glowing columns reconstructed based on. Unfortunately, not based on the original ideas. That was a visual artist who tried to redo the thing based on some photographs, some black and white photographs. So it really didn't give back the original sense, the original feeling of the artwork, because it was very complex. Kepes also used rock formations and stones, that he placed underneath on a mirror. So he just wanted to play around with the idea that the organic quality and also the technological, engineered quality are in a playful dialogue with each other.
And actually, that kind of leads me to the project with the flames, because I think that it's a very, for that time period, I think it's a very unique synesthetic approach to integrate kind of natural phenomena with let's say, audio and controlled by some kind of device. I'm not sure how it was controlled.
Yeah.
Could you say a few things about that in terms of there was a collaborator, I remember.
There were many collaborators.
No, but for that piece.
Yes, many collaborators.
Many. Yeah.
Yes,
for
because
that
there was a person who wrote the music score,
Yeah.
Pollock, and there was also an engineer whose name is Mauricio Bueno from Ecuador.
Okay.
And he was Kepes' student at that time at MIT. So, and also there was a physicist, so a third person,
Okay.
So it was a real collaboration. And but Kepes' idea with that piece, the Flame Orchard, was to kind of imitate the lost warmth of the fireplace. So the fireplace is the epicenter was in the epicenter of the house, where the family were gathering, around. And I think Kepes had cherished this idea from his childhood memory. So this quality of light that can unify society, unify a small nucleus of people, like a family, or it can also unify a larger group of people, like a society, because he wanted to use these works in a public space. The public that he habitually referred to as civic, not public. He never used this term public work, but he always used civic work. So the fireplace and these light artworks, these huge scale installations, which he was not able to realize, that time in the end of 60s and early 70s, because technology was not that far out. That was the same problem with the Bauhaus in the 1920s, that they had these big conceptions, but they were not able to realize them. And I think that's why Kepes is. Unfortunately, there are only a few sketches, that would give us the concrete idea how he meant to realize these works. But mostly Kepes did just some drawings, and there were his students or associates who were working at a School of Architecture and Planning at MIT, and they finished the piece. For example, Robert Pruser, who also was a teacher in Chicago at the School of Design, and Kepes hired him to MIT because actually Kepes was looking at the center as the extension of this Bauhaus idea. And that was something that in the early 70s, the MIT administration was not very keen about. So that's why they put Vaini Anderson, he was also in the film, this art historian who came, was a very dandy figure. He was part of the New York artwork. He knew a lot of like pop artists and did many exhibitions for the minimalist artist and conceptual artist. And so Kepes' Bauhaus-oriented center was a place which what MIT administration wanted to somehow leverage with this person, Vaini Anderson, who was the head of the Herein Gallery. So he curated exhibitions there, importing New York-based artists, whether as opposed to Kepes' idea, because Kepes wanted to have his own fellows, and he wanted to promote the Boston
Right.
like artistic scene. So that was also like gave some tension between artists and professors
So
at that time working at
It's
MIT.
interesting that you mentioned artists, because I think most of the people in the film who kind of gave comments were architects.
They were architects because of the School of Architecture and Planning. So Kepes' colleagues, most of his associates were architects, not artists. But Kepes had also galleries in Boston and also in New York, the Seidenberg Gallery. Seidenberg was the first gallery which represented European avant-garde art. For example, they showed, I think, the first time Picasso in the United States, and Kepes was one of their artists. They had the gallery at the Madison Avenue, and Kepes had also a very fine gallery in Boston, the Schwetzhof Gallery. So he had this very interesting dual approach. So this private art and the public art, and his private art was very different than his public art. So he did mostly paintings, like abstract expressionist painting, and also photograms. He reinvented some old like techniques on how to do photogram that was already prevalent in the 19th century, and in his public art he really wanted to embrace this idea how to collaborate with engineers and scientists, and how they can just team up together and do something that is not just aesthetically pleasing but also functional. So, for example, Kepes designed this like a beacon which would give you which is operated with laser lights, little laser beams, but it would also display the meteorological data, the temperature, the kind of humidity and all these information. So it was like an information display, but also you could look at it as an aesthetic object.
So my last question is, both György Kepes and László Mohor Nagy kept their Hungarian first names. Would be a lot easier, I think, for people to pronounce George as opposed to George. Any anecdotes about that?
Yes, I mean, Mohor Nagy used on the cover of his books and also the text and articles he wrote, the abbreviated form of his first name. So he only used L dot, to make it less confusing. And Kepes, when he was working in Berlin in Germany, he used the German equivalent of his first name, Georg.
Right.
And when he arrived to the United States in 1937 and started to work in Chicago, when you opened this new Bauhaus catalog, the curriculum of the school, then you will see his name, George Kepes.
Okay.
But only for he kept it only for a few years, because in 1944 his first book, The Language of Vision, was published under his original Hungarian name, György Kepes.
So I think it's time for a couple of questions from the audience.
Thank you very much, Martin. It was a super film, and as an art historian, I commend you for having switched from one discipline to another. It is an amazing leap that you made, and you really should be congratulated. I'm curious about Kepes' paintings. Did he try to exhibit them during his time in Boston? What has happened to them? And finally, is the gallery in Paris, the director of which you had interviewed, a representative of his work at the present?
Yes, Kepes. So the main problem is with Kepes is that he was a very how shall I put it? He was a very generous artist. So if somebody visited him at home, he would give at least a small paintings as a present, and most of his beautiful and most important paintings are ended up in private collections. So that's why, because I'm also working on a monograph, a first biography on Kepes, and I would like to dedicate a chapter to him as a painter, and that's a very challenging task, unfortunately, because even collections like a Chase Manhattan Bank in New York, for 10 years of constant search to reach the collection supervisor. I managed to do that 2 weeks ago. Okay. And it turned out that they have incredible Kepes paintings from the end of the 50s and early 60s. And some of the major collections, yesterday I screened you a painting he did also in the 50s titled City, that is in the collection of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And obviously there are also many paintings in Hungary, because in the same manner that Victor Vasarely donated a chunk of his estate to his homeland, Kepes did the same in the early 90s when he was still alive. So we have a Kepes museum, it's called Kepes Institute, in the northern part of Hungary, not far from the city or the settlement, the village where Kepes was born. And we have there more than 50 of his paintings. But I just get very excited by the fact, that a week ago I visited Stanford University here in California, where Kepes' papers went to. So it is also very interesting why not MIT purchased Kepes' papers, because there was a second-hand bookstore in Boston which offered Kepes' archive 10 years ago. It was on sale, and it somehow ended up here in the West Coast, Kepes' papers. And by browsing through those boxes that I've never had the chance to look at last week, and I just came across with thousands, really not hundreds, thousands of transparencies with Kepes' paintings. Unfortunately, they are just the transparency without any additional details or information like the title, the dimension, or the year when they were painted. So that would be also a very challenging task to just to do an inventory and try to refine the original location of his paintings. This person, Massimo Vignelli, who was the designer of the New York subway map, he just got as a present from Kepes the most wonderful painting, I think, that Kepes ever done. It's titled Rome, because that time in the 60s, Kepes was a fellow at the American Academy in Rome, and he had a studio over there, and he painted some of works there, and one of them ended up in the collection of Vignelli, who unfortunately also died a few years ago.
Is there another question?
Thank you. It was really quite a wonderful cinematic experience and also very informative. I had a question about one of the people who showed up. All sorts of people showed up, and they were in that context. But there was one that stood out to me that I'm curious about. Octavio Paz was in the beginning of the movie, and then there was never mentioned again.
Say it again, his name?
Octavio Paz?
Octavio Paz, yes.
What was his connection?
Yes, so in these black and white sequence of images that I try to, use as an introduction or like an opening score, I selected some of these persons Kepes was maintained a very close connection with. And Octavio Paz was one of them, because Kepes was not only contacted scientist, but also he had many friends who were writers and poets. And Octavio Paz was the one who I think was also a friend of this architect Sert, Jose Sert, right? The Spanish architect. And Sert designed the house of Gerald Holton, this Harvard physics professor, who was the head of the Unity of Science movement at Harvard. So his place was like the epicenter of these emigre artists and scientists. And Kepes mentioned in many of his interviews that he had long discussions with Octavio Paz as well. Unfortunately, I don't know what they were talking about because there are no transcripts about these like gatherings or talks. But I'm sure that they were met also there in Cambridge and also in Wellfleet. You know, Wellfleet, the Cape Cod, that was also a gathering place during the summer for all these professors who were working in Cambridge. And Octavio Paz was a frequent guest of Kepes because we also have the guest book. Kepes had a guest book in his Wellfleet apartment, his summer cottage. And you can just read and study the list of these pages, you know, that are in the guest book, and that's also available in the collection at Stanford. You will really get shocked, you know, that how many incredible people he was in contact with, and they came to visit him during the summer.
So in closing, because I think we have to close, I just want to thank Márton all the way from Budapest to come here and to fill in all these gaps in my personal knowledge of the early starts of the arts and science and technology connection at MIT. So thank you very much. And
thank you very much for inviting me over.